Hello, welcome to this channel. Our channel narrates the life stories of our viewers from all around the world. To protect individuals' privacy, names are altered. I'm Michael, a boy born into a religious family. My family had their own beliefs and were very committed to them. We were a big family, 3 sons and 2 daughters, and I was the youngest. Because of that, my siblings gave me a lot of attention, and most of them got married quite early. Academically, my family was all educated and worked as engineers, so during school, my family was often troubled by me because I wasn't much into studying. Instead, I spent most of my time being playful and mischievous. My family constantly had to remind and talk to me to try to improve my behavior and manners. Everyone in the neighborhood was surprised that despite growing up in such a calm and respectable family, I was such an easygoing and lively guy. Around the beginning of middle school, I started interacting with girls, which led my family to forbid me from attending language classes where boys and girls were mixed. Because of my mischievousness, my teacher had already informed my family about everything. For a while, I tried to study better because I wasn't allowed to do anything else and was deprived of many things. I studied and entered high school, choosing the math field like my brothers. Although it was hard for me, I made every effort and managed to get into a good university. My family was always dissatisfied with me and constantly tried to advise me, hoping to change my behavior, but none of their words were acceptable to me. I always did what I wanted and believed that since we live only once, at least I wanted that one chance to live by my own rhythm. In my view, life is always tough, so I'd rather bear the hardships I choose for myself. Upon entering university, I started attending music classes because I had loved playing instruments since childhood. Now that I had been accepted into a good university, I was able to stand up to my family and tell them that music was one of my interests. I wasn't a particularly studious person at university. My enthusiasm was more focused on attending music classes. There were plenty of girls who liked me, and I was quick to engage with people. Once, I got a little close to a girl in university but quickly realized I wasn't interested and ended it. After a while, I noticed a girl in my music class who had recently enrolled. She was very pretty, and as usual, I started talking to her, asking her questions, how old she was, what her name was, etc. She was warm and responsive, which drew me to her instantly. Her name was Elisa. She hadn't gone to university and was only attending this music class. Like me, her interest had started in childhood, but due to life circumstances, she hadn't been able to pursue it earlier. She was attractive and had a good figure. After a while, I tried to get closer to her, though initially she wasn't very interested and kept her distance. Then one day, I set my pride aside and expressed my feelings, asking her to date me. Elisa asked me to give her some time to think, and I agreed. A few days later, when we met again, she started on the conversation, asking me what my intentions were. It was surprising that she wanted to know the end from the beginning. I told her that if things went well, we might end up together for life. Elisa said she didn't feel capable of managing a relationship. I didn't pay much attention to her words and continued, saying that if things went well, we would get married. Finally, Elisa agreed to my request after taking a while, even though it was clear she wanted to herself. However, since I didn't know much about her life circumstances, I assumed she might feel insecure. That's why, during our friendship, I tried not to buy Elisa expensive gifts so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable around me. I adjusted myself to her level, and we built a good relationship. One day, when I was at home talking to Elisa on the phone, my sister arrived. She noticed the smile on my face, and although I quickly hung up the phone when I saw her, she teased me, saying I must be in love. At that moment, my heart started racing, and since I'm not the shy type, I ignored my sister and showed her a picture of Elisa, saying, "I like this girl." My sister didn't say much, only remarked that she looks good, but that family and character matter more than appearance. After that, I even told Elisa about this, and our friendship grew even longer. Since my family didn't know I was seeing a girl named Elisa, they were constantly trying to find a good match for me to marry. They even suggested a few girls from the family, but no matter how much my mother insisted that these girls would be good for me, I wouldn't agree. Even my sister, who knew about Elisa, advised me not to get too attached to strangers whose pasts I didn't know well, suggesting that it would be better if I married someone the family knew. Despite all this, I refused and told my sister that I would marry no one but Elisa. I even thought that if I married someone else, Elisa would be hurt deeply, and I would be betraying her. I also had a friend named Isa, who was from my neighborhood. I was the first to show him Elisa's picture. Isa also sided with my family, saying I should let go of this girl, seriously think about marriage, and build my life on solid ground. But I didn't listen to him either. I felt like everyone wanted to separate me from Elisa. Finally, one day, I told Elisa that if my family agreed, I would like to propose to her. She initially refused, but I explained that my family was pressuring me and looking for a bride, and I didn't want to marry anyone but her. Hearing this, Elisa seemed to realize the seriousness and told me she would first talk to her family. If they agreed, she would let me know. 2 days later, Elisa informed me that her family had no objections. Elisa's father had passed away, and she had a mother and 2 younger sisters. After Elisa's approval, it felt like the whole world had been given to me. That same day, I talked to my mother, telling her openly which girl I had met and how I wanted to propose to her, but my mother didn't speak calmly. She got angry, saying I was viewing life too childishly. She repeated that we didn't know this girl well enough, and that it was a mistake to rush into marriage. However, I stood firm on my decision, and after much arguing with my family, I convinced them to go to Elisa's proposal. On the night of the proposal, Elisa's mother talked about money so much that my mother got upset and even said aloud to me that this girl was interested in my money, not me. I remained silent, and Elisa didn't say anything either. The first proposal meeting was horribly awkward because my family wasn't supportive, and Elisa's mother spoke very immaturely. The next day, I told Elisa that next time we came for the proposal, she should tell her mother. The next time we went for a proposal, everything went more smoothly, even though it was clear from my mother's face that she was reluctantly sitting there, asking for this girl's hand on Michael's behalf. We each discussed our traditions, then moved on to setting a date for the engagement and other ceremonies. My family insisted that we stay engaged for a relatively long time to get to know each other better. They weren't pleased with the idea that we'd already been in touch and knew each other to some extent. My mother kept reminding me daily that this girl wasn't right for me. But despite everything, I stood by Elisa with all my heart, convinced I was making the right choice. I never even considered that perhaps my family's concerns might be valid. But sometimes, our mistake as humans is thinking we see the situation more clearly than others, and missing mistakes we could avoid otherwise. Finally, our first ceremony took place, with only close family members in attendance. That evening, my family's expressions were gloomy because Elisa only had her mother and 2 sisters present, which seemed odd to us. Why wasn't she in touch with any other relatives? I didn't want to question Elisa about it, partly because I felt she might feel embarrassed or wouldn't tell me the whole truth, and I wasn't ready to hear lies from someone I loved. Although my mother made snide comments at Elisa that night, she said nothing, which I thought was because she loved me and didn't want to lose me over such remarks. I then decided to arrange for Elisa to meet with my friend Isa. After we had a brief conversation as a group, Isa later told me he felt Elisa's behavior didn't align well with my family's values, and he saw things in her that I might be missing because I was in love. But this time, I didn't stay quiet. Having seen Elisa's behavior in front of my mother, I felt compelled to defend her and told Isa he had no right to talk that way about the woman who was to be my future wife. From that day on, Isa stopped giving his opinions on Elisa, only wishing me well and hoping I wouldn't regret my choice. None of this, however, made me question my decision to marry Elisa. Every time Elisa visited our home, some kind of tension would arise, though she usually stayed quiet. But once, when my mother was talking, as she often did, about how important it is for a couple to be of the same social and religious background, Elisa suddenly snapped and harshly told my mother that these matters were only between her and Michael. Then, angry, she stormed off to another room. I stood there not knowing what to do. Should I remind my mother not to make such comments? Or should I tell Elisa that she should respect my mother no matter what? I gently told Elisa her reaction wasn't right, and that it didn't reflect well on her. Elisa, realizing what she had done, looked regretful and then said she'd apologize, which she did. As we moved closer to our wedding date, one day while Elisa and my sister were shopping in a mall, I noticed a woman seemed to be following us. While they went into a store, I approached the woman and asked if there was something she wanted. At first, she didn't respond, but after a few moments, she began to cry and said that Elisa had ruined her life. I couldn't make sense of her words, and she soon left. When Elisa came back and asked who the woman was, I told her she was just asking for directions. However, the woman's words stayed with me, making me wonder what Elisa could have done to turn her life upside down. Right then, I told Elisa and my sister to go ahead and shop while I hurried to find that woman, hoping to understand what she really meant. As soon as I saw her, she started crying and said that this girl came into my life, took my husband away from me, and caused me to separate from my husband with 2 children, resulting in a huge failure in my life. Hearing these words from that woman made me feel like my hands and feet went numb. I couldn't believe that Elisa could be such a girl who would want to destroy her own life like this. I asked the woman if this had happened recently, and she said it happened last year. However, I didn't believe her, even though my mind was overwhelmed with confusion. I separated from that woman and spent some time alone, thinking about her words. Later, I went back to Elisa and my sister. After my sister separated from us, I asked Elisa if she had ever had a serious relationship with someone. Elisa asked why I had such a question. When I asked again, she told me that while she had been in relationships before, they were never for marriage, and I was the first person she decided to marry. After that, I tried to push the woman's words out of my mind, although they had shaken me a bit. Still, I trusted Elisa so much that I couldn't believe those words could be even 1% true. That's why my decision to marry Elisa remained firm. A little while before the wedding, we went shopping for wedding items. On that day, I couldn't hold back and asked Elisa if she had ever been involved with a guy who was committed to someone else. Elisa's face immediately hardened, and she harshly denied my question. At that moment, I realized that I had been judging Elisa all along, and it was better not to believe the words of a stranger. The shopping was finished, and the plan was to prepare the house for Elisa in our own neighborhood, as our house was in a 2-story building, and Elisa was fine with living there with my family. As the wedding day approached, Isa once again told me, although he was upset by my earlier words, he felt it was his duty as a friend to warn me again that this girl was not suitable to be my wife. However, this time I didn't argue and told him, Elisa is the best wife for me. And the wedding day arrived. I was the happiest man that day and felt proud to have found a partner like Elisa. I felt at peace and couldn't wait to pick her up. When I saw her, it was as though I was looking at the most beautiful creation of God. We walked to the hall with the cameraman following us. Elisa's relatives had not come, only her mother and 2 sisters were there, which made my mother comment that many of Elisa's relatives were not there, implying that she didn't have a proper family. I didn't care about this anymore. The celebration began, and while I was in the hall, my eyes fell on the same woman I had seen in the shopping mall that day. Surprised, I went towards her and dragged her to the courtyard. The woman said she thought that by speaking to me, I would come to my senses and separate from Elisa, but now that she saw I wasn't wealthy, she had decided to reveal the past truths about Elisa to me. I stood there, stunned, listening to her. She started speaking, saying that Elisa, due to her financial difficulties in the past, had been involved with multiple men, one of whom was my husband. She continued, claiming that Elisa had caused the lives of thousands of women to be ruined, and that she had started this at a young age. She even became known in their area for these actions, and that's why her family had abandoned her. She also said that Elisa's mother was very money-driven and had let her daughter do whatever she wanted in exchange for money. I couldn't believe what she was saying until Elisa came to my side and saw the woman. Elisa began begging, claiming she would make things right and that her past mistakes wouldn't affect her future. When Elisa confirmed the woman's words, I realized that everything she had said was true. Even though I had not believed it when Elisa hadn't said it herself, it became undeniable at that moment. I didn't know what to say to my family or how to stop the wedding. I realized that with the choice I had made, my reputation was ruined, and no one but myself was to blame. At that moment, my sister came to see what was happening, and we all gathered there. The only thing I could say was, I can't marry Elisa. My sister was looking at me with surprised eyes, asking me why, and the reason was that the woman said that Elisa was the one causing trouble. Elisa wanted to attack that woman, and I didn't allow that. I warned Elisa to be careful with her actions, at least to keep my dignity intact in front of all those guests. My father was a very well-known person, and it wouldn't be right for my careless mistake to ruin the reputation he'd built for many years. That night, despite all the difficulty, we managed the ceremony until late. At the end of the night, it seemed like my sister had gone and told everything to my mother. My mother came to me with a very bad mood, constantly belittling me, saying she had warned me from the beginning that that woman wasn't suitable for me, and that I had made a big mistake. Even though I knew my family was right and they had every right to say that, My sister kept telling my mother to calm down and manage her emotions. Through this, my father found out, and that was the last party where almost everyone had figured out that something had happened. But my older brother managed to guide everyone outside and said we didn't have any plans to go after the bride and groom, and in this way, the guests left, and only the close ones stayed. I turned to Elisa and told her that I no longer accepted her as my wife. Just then, her mother came back and said it would be better if I paid the dowry completely. That's when I realized the truth. Her mother was only after money and our wealth. Elisa cried a lot and begged me not to leave her, saying she loved me, but I knew her words were a lie. It was a huge betrayal, and I learned a big lesson. My dignity was gone in front of my family, and on the other hand, I had fallen for a girl who had a bad past. With the help of a lawyer, I managed to divorce Elisa quickly. I paid the dowry because I loved her and didn't want her whole life to be ruined, but Elisa tried very hard to get back with me. However, I couldn't marry someone with such a bad past. Until that day, I hadn't even touched an unrelated woman. For a long time, my family kept reminding me that they had seen this ending from the start. Although my sister helped me a lot to recover, and of course my friend Isa, several years have passed since that incident, and I couldn't get close to anyone again. I preferred to focus on my studies and start working at my father's company. Elisa still continues with her old work and has returned to me a few times, but I didn't accept her. The incident that happened because of Elisa taught me a big lesson. Sometimes it's not right to make big decisions on our own, and it's better to consult with older people. Since I always had a guard up against my family, it seemed like I wanted to get close to Elisa out of defiance and stand my ground. However, I paid a heavy price for it. Even though it was a great lesson for me, from that point on, I consult with my father, brother, or sister before making any decision and try to avoid making mistakes. I also never got involved in emotional matters again, and after Elisa, I didn't fall for anyone. Even though I had a cousin who was very willing to marry me and even accepted everything that had happened, I didn't accept her. After that, I ended up alone. Now, after all these years, I still can't forget Elisa and haven't been able to get close to anyone else. I feel like all women are like Elisa. That's why it was a lesson for me to never do anything out of spite, to always be cautious in my steps, and never trust others too quickly because some mistakes are irreparable.